Hello Game Boys and Game Girls, and welcome to another pickups video. This is going to be a more exciting pickups video, at least for me, because I got a pretty big find today. But this will encompass the stuff that I picked up 2 days ago and then what I got today. So let's start with the stuff I got 2 days ago. I was, as you know, if you watched my previous video, I was traveling for business, and I picked up a number of things while I was doing that. I got a chance to stop at a shop that I had not been to on my way home. It's part of a chain of stores in the area that I'm at that's kind of relatively new to my area, and I shop pretty frequently at the location closest to me, and then I go to the next one, 20 miles down the road when I get the opportunity. But I had not been to this third newest location here in the state, and so I stopped in on my way home and found a couple of things. So I was able to add some couple of Game Boy carts to the collection with that. So first I got Animaniacs Wacky Sports. Didn't even know this one existed, so cool to find the occasional Game Boy game that I didn't even know about, other than just kind of seeing it in a list. Also got Mousetrap Hotel, which I was familiar with and have not played this one yet, but I've heard good things, so I look forward to checking that out. And I had to double check my collection because I knew I had one of the games from this franchise, but I couldn't remember which one I picked up because it's been a little while. But that's Star Trek: The Next Generation. So I double checked, and it looks like I picked up the original Star Trek series affiliated game, but not the Next Generation. But I know I've got the Star Trek: The Next Generation holodeck simulator on the Game Gear, so that's why I was a little confused. But big fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I watched it from first episode to the last episode as a kid. Loved it, still love it, so I definitely look forward to checking this one out. I grabbed a couple of NES carts that I didn't have, one of those being City Connection. I'm glad to finally have this in my collection because it's a game I've been wanting for a long time, and seems like I never see it in the wild, or when I do, they're in terrible shape. Ripped label or marker all over the place, that kind of a thing. And so I finally found a reasonably clean copy and decided I'm going to go for it. I also added another Tengen game to the collection, and that is Vindicators. Cool to have this one. I haven't really messed with the arcade game much, but by all accounts, it's at least a decent sort of tank shooter game, so why not? Give it a try. And I picked up a Wii title, one of the later budget releases, and this is one that I've been after for a while. Same situation as with City Connection. I always see it in the wild, but it's always in terrible shape, probably because it was a budget title and parents bought it for their kids and they destroyed it. But this copy was very clean and complete, so I decided to grab it. It's Saint. This is affiliated with the Monkey King games, and it's either a sequel or a pseudo-sequel, spiritual successor, whatever. It didn't get great reviews, I think probably because it's very simplistic and not a spectacular game. But it is a shoot 'em up. I'm a huge shoot 'em up aficionado, and if I'm thinking correctly, this completes my physical release shmup collection for the Wii, because there's only a handful of them. There's this, Monkey King, Ultimate Shooting Collection, Blastworks, Ocean Commander, and maybe one other. I'll have to look, but I think that's it. So that was 2 nights ago. Today I had opportunity to hit my usual haunts. So I hit a pair of Goodwill stores, and at one of the Goodwill stores I found this nice GameStop branded PSP case. It's got this handy little wrist strap and unzips and has plenty of space for storing UMDs, housing your PSP, etc., etc. Memory card space even. So I don't know how much I'll use it. I've got two PSPs, a 2001 and a 3000. My 2001 came with the official Sony sort of slip cover sleeve. The other one, the 3000, I got new in the box, but it did not come with that. And so I may use this for that instead of bogarting the one from the 2001 unit that I've been doing. So that's that. And also at that same location, I got an original PlayStation game, Stuart Little 2. Could be fun. A lot of these kids games get a bad reputation because they're simple kids games or whatever, but sometimes they're just as fun because they're not overly complicated and you can just sit down and play them and have a little bit of fun. May not be challenging, or maybe they are, but even if they're not challenging, they can still be fun to play. So why not? At the other Goodwill location, I got a number of items, starting with Happy Feet on the GameCube, again, sticking with the kids game theme. And then I picked a whole stack of Xbox games that they had. So I got Cars, and I've got this on the PlayStation 2, and I think I might have the GameCube version as well, but I did not have the Xbox version, so I'd have that. These are all complete in box, by the way. I generally only buy from Goodwill when I can get them complete. Harry Potter Quidditch World Cup. I've got several of the Harry Potter games, but I didn't have this one yet, and so why not? A Platinum Hits version of Finding Nemo. NBA Jam, which I don't know how much it plays like the original NBA Jam. I loved that original arcade game back in the day. I've never been a huge basketball fan, but of course that's more of a arcadey 2-on-2, just have a good time and see who can dunk and break the backboard and that sort of thing. So why not? Plus it says Boom Shakalaka on the back. So hopefully some of that fun and spirit from that original game remains. But it's cool because not only is it complete with the manual, but it also comes with an Xbox Live 2 months free card, which of course now is completely null and void, but cool that it's still included. And there's also, and I love finding this stuff in used games when I pick them up, there's also a piece of paper in here with what appears to be some cheat codes and some stuff that somebody wrote down. So love finding that stuff. Old receipts, cheat codes, and notes that people write about the games. That stuff is always fun. Adds a little bit of history and richness to the purchase. So that's always fun to find that stuff. Got Ice Age 2, The Meltdown. I've never really seen any of the Ice Age movies, and by all accounts, they're not that great, but hey, why not? Got Madagascar, and of course the famous line from that movie, "Nature, get it off me!" But yeah, that could be fun. And Nickelodeon Party Blast. So looks like probably a bunch of mini games with Nickelodeon characters, SpongeBob and Invader Zim on the back here. It looks like the Rugrats characters, Wild Thornberry, and I'm not sure who this other guy is, and then Jimmy Neutron. So anyway, might be cool. There's another pawn shop I frequent. Sometimes they're not open as late or as often as the pawn shop I usually go to. But my first pawn shop stop for the day, I managed to snag a few things. So I got The Simpsons Hit and Run, and I think I have the Xbox version of this. I got to double check my my listing, but anyway, I think I've heard that's a really fun game. I'm not a big Simpsons fan or a Simpsons fan at all, but the game is supposed to be good. The Da Vinci Code I grabbed. the other pawn shop that I frequent, where I buy stuff more often, they've had 2 or 3 copies of this game in there, but they're really beat up and no manual, and the discs look bad, so I haven't picked up a copy. But this happened to be a very clean copy, complete with the manual. So even though I think the whole Da Vinci Code thing is lame and whatnot, I decided, hey, it's a PS2 game I don't have. Why not? And again, here's another one I hadn't heard of, City Crisis. It's one of the blue discs, and so I don't remember exactly if it's the silver discs or the DVDs and the blue ones are the CD-based games. I don't remember for sure, but anyway, it's by Take-Two Interactive, and looks kind of cool. It's like, instead of, you know, flying around with a helicopter and shooting people, this is like a rescue game where you're supposed to go and rescue people from buildings that are on fire and stuff like that. So yeah, that should be fun. Garfield Lasagna World Tour. Who knows? But it looks like it has sort of a semi-cell shaded look to it. So might be cool. I'm hoping that the guy who does the Garfield voice at least lended his talent to this. But yeah, Garfield. And finally, I'd not seen this before. It's an Xbox 360 dual pack game. So it's Marvel Ultimate Alliance and Forza Motorsport. And I did double check. I had them, the games are always taped up in there, and I always sort of crack open the bottom or top corner to see, is there a manual in there? And if there's a manual, then I take it up to the counter and ask if they can cut the tape and let me look inside to make sure that A, the manual is the right manual and then it looks good, and B, it's the right disc. Well, this happened to be a double disc game, and so you've got Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and you've got Forza Motorsport 2, I guess it is. And it does indeed have both manuals, so gotta love that. I've got a couple of the dual pack games. Of course, the famous Jet Set Radio and Sega Racing 2002 or Sega something. It's a Sega racing game for the original Xbox. I've got that, and then I've got it was Tetris Worlds and Star Wars. I don't remember. It's a Star Wars game. Clone Wars, maybe? Anyway, always fun to find stuff like that in the wild. And on to the game store that's affiliated with the one that I grabbed that stuff on the way home with my trip. I stopped in there, and I almost always grab a 5-pack of NES cartridge sleeves because they sell these bundled in 5-packs. So always cool to get more of those. I'm attempting to get a sleeve for every game that I have. So every time I go in there, I usually pick up at least one of these and sleeve more games. But as I do that, I'm almost always picking up NES games because I always find them. And this is a black box title that I didn't have, and this is Pinball, the original Nintendo pinball game. I know there's at least 2 variants of this, and they had both versions there at the store. I didn't pick them both up, but I picked this one up because it's the round seal version, which means it's the older version, or like the original release, because it's the round seal with the black background. The later releases, or later NES games, have the oval seal with sort of the white background and a little bit more pronounced gold in the seal. But anytime you see the round gold seal with the black background, that is an original, most likely an original print run of the game. So if you're hardcore about that or collecting variants, that's something to watch for. So I grabbed this one. I may go back and get the other one some other time, assuming it's still there, because I am collecting variants, kind of, sort of. I've got a handful of games that I have 2 copies of because I've got variants, and there are some that there are 3, 4, maybe even 5 variants of. I think there's maybe only 1 or 2 that have 4 variants or what have you, but there are several that have at least 2. And a lot of times the earlier releases, you can see on this one it's got 3 screws. Some of the earlier releases and the earlier print variants have 5 screws. So you'll have these 3 screws that you have, and then you'll have additional screws in the 2 corners. But this one didn't, so I don't know if there's another variant of it or not. I'd have to look in a database. Usually I use RF Generation because they keep track of those variants, and and that's a good way of seeing whether your NES collection is truly complete, because they keep track of all the different print runs and variations. So yeah, rfgeneration.com. There's a plug. And moving on to the pawn shop that I usually frequent. I picked up one Xbox game, excuse me, and 3 Xbox 360 games. So I got the Platinum Hits version of True Crime: Streets of LA. I believe I have this now for all 3 platforms, and I think I had the original release of this for the Xbox as well. So now I have the Platinum Hits version, but it seems to pop up almost everywhere out in the wild. So I guess it sold well enough to get Platinum Hits on the Xbox. And I suspect it has the greatest hits on the PS2. I don't know if it sold well enough on the GameCube to garner a favorites release with the yellow bar at the top, but it obviously sold reasonably well. But this copy is in good shape, and so always glad to add some new games to the collection. Got Blazing Angels 2. Secret Missions of World War II. I've seen this for the Wii and have wanted to pick it up a few times, but I always see it either without the manual or it's really beat up. So I saw this on the Xbox 360, didn't know it got a release on that. But as I'm looking at the back of the box, it just looks stunning. And I'm not a big sort of aerial combat guy. I've got a few of the Ace Combat games. But for the original Xbox, I really like Crimson Skies. I'm assuming this is not going to be too much like that, but because it's kind of using the World War II era planes, and you've got the dirigible there that it's fighting against, so that could be fun. I like World War II related games, so that one should be fun. And I finally took the plunge. I've purchased some of the older Call of Duty games. I've got Call of Duty 2 and 3, Finest Hour, and I've got a couple of the other ones. I've got a version of Modern Warfare 2, I want to say, for the Wii, that I got at a garage sale last summer, and some stuff like that. But I've not purchased any of this series. So now I officially have Call of Duty Black Ops. So I'm not a big FPS guy. I was there at the start of the whole FPS sort of phenomenon. I downloaded Wolfenstein 3D on a computer. I was working for a farmer one summer, and he and I downloaded the Wolfenstein 3D demo from the local BBS, for those of you old enough to remember bulletin board systems, and we played that game a ton, loved it, bought the original Doom, loved that, played a ton of Duke Nukem 3D, and still like that game. Have got that on the Saturn, and even though that version is not as well regarded, I still think it's reasonably well done for a console. But kind of after that, and like Rise of the Triad, I sort of fell out of love, if you will, with FPS games, because I tend to lose my bearings pretty easily. So if the maps are too big or if they're too complicated, I get lost. And a lot of times I don't know where to go or how to find my way. And so that kind of takes a little bit of the fun out of it for me. But some of these newer games, they tend to have a little bit more, I don't want to say they're more linear, but they tend to, with story missions and things like that, they tend to kind of guide you where you need to go, by making the designs in such a way that, well, you killed all the enemies here, there's nothing more to do, so, well, but there's some shots over here in the distance, and it sounds like there's something going over here, so maybe I ought to go over there and check that out. That seems to be how some of the more modern games are doing it. So anyway, this series is so highly acclaimed, and I'm not an online guy. You know, I'm not gonna go out and buy a headset so I can jump online with this to hear a bunch of 14-year-olds tell me about all the filthy things that they have done to people that I know. But I want to at least play through the single-player campaign and see what all the fuss is about. So I will be giving that one a try. And I'm a big fan of this series in general, although I've always kind of stuck with the 2D games because that's what I grew up with. But this was at the pawn shop. It was ultra cheap, and so I figured I'd check it out. It's Castlevania Lords of Shadow. So yeah, I'll be checking that out as well. Now, the grand finale, because nothing that I've shown you so far has been really exciting in terms of stuff. I mean, it's all fun stuff, and it's stuff I'm glad to have in my collection and play. But the next item is one of those major finds that I wanted to show, because it's not just one item, it's multiple items that all kind of go together. And I'm going to tilt this down so you can see I now have my very own ColecoVision. Woo! Yeah, so I got a ColecoVision. And cool thing is, it's in reasonably good shape. You know, it's not perfect. It's a little dirty. Needs to be cleaned up a little bit. But otherwise, it's in reasonable shape. It's got the original controllers here. And, of course, when I had the people at the pawn shop take it out of the case for me, I made sure to check that all the buttons had good action on them, and that they all felt good. The controllers, of course, are the 9-pin standard, and I know there are some additional controllers you can get for the ColecoVision, but, you know, it seems like these are, like this is going to be good. This pawn shop does test stuff before they sell it, so I know that somebody booted this thing up and tried it. The other cool thing is it came with this nice sort of holder, and so you can see there's all these games in there in these nice little slots, and then it's got this nice sort of computer game system tray that it sits in. So it holds the ColecoVision nicely. I'm assuming it's meant for it because it sits in there and it doesn't move. And then there's this nice tray in the back where you can store the now famous, because of AVGN, humongous AC adapter, or the transformer converter for it. And of course, it's got the RF adapter. It did come with a couple of the button overlay deals. I'm not sure what game this is for, but it's got a little dog face on the number 5 key. So again, I don't know what I don't know what game this is for, but they're marked 1982 Coleco Industries, so I'll have to do a little research on that. The other thing is, this must have come off the back of the system, but this is actually the sticker that has the serial number and all that information with it. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if I'll just hold on to that or if I will attempt to re-adhese it to the back, but I think I might just hold on to it. And again, it came with a bunch of games. So we've got Word Feud, which I've not heard of. Carnival. Congo Bongo, a Sega arcade game, which I'm excited to play because a friend of mine, my next door neighbor growing up, had an Atari 2600, and we played the 2600 version of Congo Bongo a lot. So I look forward to this one because it should have improved graphics and sound. Stern's Frenzy, which, if memory serves, is a sequel to Berserk. Beam Rider, which I believe is one of the more well-known ColecoVision games, if I'm thinking that correctly. War Games. Do you want to play a game? And cool thing with War Games is it uses the overlays for the gamepad, and it's got both of them in the back. So that's awesome. There's Mr. Do, which is awesome. I've got the Game Boy version, but cool to have this because you don't have to scroll like you do on the Game Boy version. And I will be on the lookout for Mr. Do's Castle because that is actually the Mr. Do arcade game that I prefer. And I know there's a reasonably good conversion that came out for the ColecoVision, so I'm looking forward to that. This is Smurf. Now, I thought the game came out as The Smurfs, but maybe it was just Smurf. But this particular cartridge says, for use on PAL TV system. So I'm not sure why the PAL cartridge would be in with this set, or whether this even works in here. But I know this is a U.S. manufactured deal because the sticker with the serial number and the sticker on the top, the consumer note, both have the 800 number, and of course that would only be here in America. So Smurf. There's Cabbage Patch Kids Adventure in the Park. No idea what that'll be like. Oops. Mountain King, another game I'd not heard of, and it's a really simple silver label presented by Sunrise Software Inc., a company I'm not familiar with. Ladybug, which I believe is an arcade conversion and possibly a sort of Pac-Man-esque kind of thing. I've not played the arcade. River Raid, which cool to have that because that's a shmup, sort of an early example of a console shmup. That was on the 2600 as well. Donkey Kong Jr., which I'm excited about. This is Mousetrap. The label comes off, unfortunately, so I may try to find and see if there's a non-destructive glue or something that I can use to re-affix the label to the cartridge so that it won't fall off. And then there were some cartridges in the back. There's Rock and Rope, which I've heard of, but I don't really know anything about. But this one is for both the ColecoVision and the Coleco Adam computer. There's Qbert, which the label is upside down compared to other games. So I don't have any version of Qbert yet, so this is cool that I finally have Q*bert on some game system. Although I played Q*bert a lot on the 2600. Again, my next door neighbor. The official Zaxxon by Sega, as it says on the cartridge. Loved Zaxxon as a kid. Played that on the C64 at a neighbor kid's house, a different neighbor. And so we'll be putting some time into that. And a mystery game, which I think I know what it is based on the manuals that I got. And I'll show you those real quick. So we have the ColecoVision arcade quality video game system. I don't know about arcade quality, but I'm sure in 1982 this probably seemed like it was pretty hardcore. So that's cool to have the actual ColecoVision manual for the system. This is the manual for Mountain King, and I don't know if this is the official manual or if this is like a reprint. But it says, the object of Mountain King is to capture the golden crown of the temple and carry it safely to the top of the mountain before your time expires and or you are destroyed. So, seems like a pretty simple game, but that should help me figure out how to play. There's the manual for Mousetrap, the manual for Carnival, a nice thick, heavy manual for War Games, because this game actually uses the overlays for the game. Plus, this has German language and French in here, so it covers multiple territories. So that's why it's much thicker. There's a manual for Cabbage Patch Kids, for Mr. Do, Frenzy, Ladybug, Smurf, and if you look at the manual for Smurf there, you can see multiple languages. So maybe it will work on this system. There's also a manual for Q*bert, which is a little different than the other manuals. And the reason I think that the mystery game is not exactly a mystery is because there's also a manual for Frogger. So my game that's missing a label on the front is most likely Frogger. I will find out when I boot it up. There's also a little booklet here that talks about some of the other games that you can get for the ColecoVision, like Donkey Kong and Space Fury, which is a Sega arcade game, Venture, Sidetrack, Spectar, which looks a bit like the old PC game Crossfire, but a little different. Ripcord, which appears to be sort of like a parachuting game. Avoid the helicopters and planes as you're parachuting down. Cosmic Avenger, which looks like a Scramble clone. Of course, I'm not mentioning the games that I already have here. Turbo, which is a racing game that looks suspiciously like Enduro Racer, although it is an arcade conversion. There's head-to-head baseball, head-to-head football, skiing, horse racing, yay, blackjack and poker, tunnels and trolls, which actually sounds like it would be fun, chess challenger, what else? Mr. Turtle. I guess there's more than one Smurf game. There's Smurf, Play and Learn, and then there's Smurf, Rescue and Gargamel's Castle. So this doesn't say which one this is. So I guess it's a crapshoot. It also mentions the expansion module which I will be seeking out because then I don't necessarily have to have my 2600 hooked up. I can just use the expansion module and have access to all my 2600 games, so that I've got that. And the expansion module 2, which is a racing wheel, presumably for use with games like Turbo. And then it also came with this other fun little book, CBS Electronics. Here it's got a picture of what appears to be Zaxxon on the front. If you look at the screenshot, it looks like Zaxxon. And then the art on the back has this ugly looking gorilla and of course Donkey Kong. But this also mentions a whole bunch of games that you can buy, the different expansion modules, and of course expansion module 3 basically turns your ColecoVision into a Coleco Atom computer for all intents and purposes. This mentions additional games like Looping, which is sort of a flying game, Space Panic, which looks like fun, Pepper 2, which is a maze game, and what else is in here that wasn't mentioned in that other booklet? Gorf, an arcade conversion of that classic. Time Pilot, which I think would be a lot of fun. Sub Rock, which is a Sega game. It's sort of a move the targeting reticle around the screen and shoot stuff in a submarine. Victory by Exidy. And Slither, which is sort of a snake game. It mentions the roller controller. And then the thing that I need to be on the lookout for is the Super Action controllers. I'm definitely going to have to Google those and maybe check eBay and see how much those are going for. Originally it says, according to this, it comes with the Rocky cartridge, which there's pictures of the Rocky Coleco game, which actually doesn't look half bad considering it's a ColecoVision. Of course, it's not as impressive as the, graphically anyway, as the Rocky game that came out for the Master System, but I can definitely tell that I'm fighting Clubber Lang, or that he's fighting Clubber Lang based on the graphics. But yeah, those Super Action controllers look pretty darn sweet, so I'm going to have to check those out and see if I can find those, and see if I can track a pair of those down. My assumption is for any games that don't require the full keypad that I would be able to use the Sega Genesis controllers because I've got the 3-button. I'll have to do some checking and see, but since it's a 9-pin, my assumption is that would be the case. And for a lot of these arcade conversions, Zaxxon, Donkey Kong Jr., Frenzy, Congo Bongo, etc., there should be no reason why those would actually require the use of the original controller versus an Atari joystick or Sega Genesis controller if I can substitute. But yeah, the sticks have good action. I'm not real fond of this this type of stick like here or on the Intellivision controller, but this is a new experience for me. You know, I got the opportunity to play a couple of more obscure systems growing up because not only did my next door neighbor have a 2600, but I had another friend whose mom's boyfriend had a Master System, and then I had another guy I knew at school that had a Master System. So between the two, you know, I got to play a handful of Master System games growing up. And my next door neighbor also had the original Magnavox Odyssey, which, as many of you will know, is not actually a true game console so much as just sort of a simulator that you move the dials on the deal to move your little light square around on the screen, and then based on the overlays that you put on the screen and then the rules in the large manuals that you had for every game, it was sort of like playing a board game but with some level of interactivity on the screen. But the ColecoVision is not a system that I've ever had the opportunity to play. And in fact, other than seeing them on a shelf or online, I've never had my hands on one. So this is fantastic for me to own this piece of history and to be able to hook this to a TV and start messing around with it, because I know that it's more advanced than the 2600. I grew up playing the 2600 a lot between two uncles and my next door neighbor. So I'm looking forward to getting into these games and playing these, because some of these, as I mentioned, are ones that I played on the 2600. Frenzy, I played a lot of Berserk on the 2600. I have Berserk complete in box on the 2600. So I'm looking forward to see what Frenzy looks like. I played Zaxxon on the 2600 and on the C64. So I look forward to what the ColecoVision version is going to play like. Donkey Kong Jr., I played that on the 2600 and in the arcade. So I look forward to that version. So this is just going to be loads of fun for me. And definitely something that ever since I found out about the ColecoVision and the Intellivision, because I didn't know about them when I was a little kid, they're something that I've kind of always wanted to find and obtain at some point so I could play around with them. So very glad to have this ColecoVision. That's all I have for you. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for playing, and game on.